Hi, welcome back to WizNugs. Today we're talking about boundaries. We're going to go over what they are, why they're important, and how to use them. Boundaries are a way of defining acceptable behavior.
As in what you find acceptable from other people.
Or for yourself. If you're going to set boundaries of what you are willing to do and not do, those are your boundaries. What kind of language you're willing to accept on a phone call if you work in customer service and someone, irate customers shouting at you. You might just decide, I am not going to deal with profanity from a phone call.
Even from your friends. It might not even be the profanity case. It could be your friends tend to get a little bit physical with you and they kind of like do a lot of pushing and shoving and maybe the occasional punch and stuff like that. And you could be like, you know what, I'm not okay with that. And it's perfectly fine to say, I'm not okay with this. I really don't like this kind of behavior.
Yeah, I think a common phrase that we would hear online these days is red flags.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
That is part and parcel of a very hard boundary. That's a hard stop. That means absolutely no. If I see this behavior, I'm out.
And you get to define what that is. So when we say the hard boundary of I'm not going to go beyond this is a clear indicator that this is unacceptable behavior. We're talking about these extremes. Now, any boundary that you set up is going to be subjective. It's going to be based off of how it makes you feel, and this is how we generally would define what a boundary is for you. It's anything that makes you feel different from normal. It makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel creepy. It could make you feel fearful.
Or even just guilt. A lot of times, if you're a people pleaser or in a codependent relationship or you're dealing with a narcissist, that if you're feeling that you have to do something for them because, they'll bring up all the stories of all the things that they've done for you or all the things that, when I did this, then you did. And it becomes this conscious or not, it's a form of manipulation.
Right. And sometimes, I would say in a lot of cases, especially in my experience, that tends to come from parents or people that are in a more supervisory role, that they think that they've done something enough for you and therefore you owe it to them.
Right. Or a boyfriend or girlfriend. Like it's usually these relationships where there is some emotional connection involved. Another word I've heard used is enmeshed. When emotions are tied together so tightly that when another person is happy, you feel happy. Well, that can be great. Like that can feel really good.
Sure.
But if that person becomes sad and now suddenly your life is ruined, you're down in the dumps and because that person is sad, well, then I have to go do something to fix it, to make them feel better. We talked before about the tennis court analogy of communication, that we need to stay on our side of the court. This was in our When You, I Feel episode.
Right.
When you do a certain behavior, I feel a certain emotion. We're not saying you always do this, you never do that. We're not saying you make me feel good, bad, indifferent.
Right.
We're saying when you, I feel. So the same thing goes with our actions, that we can say, these are the actions that I'm willing to do. I control my actions. You don't control my actions. And I don't control your actions. And I don't control your emotions either.
And you don't have to subject yourself to behaviors that you have defined as being bad or ill towards you, or it starts to broach upon your boundaries that you've set. Again, this can go to friends, it can go to family, it can go to workmates. Let's say, for instance, you work in an office and you start working there and everyone's really touchy-huggy, but you're not that way. It behooves you to clearly and as quickly as possible to let people know, communicate that. I know that you guys are all huggy and lovey, and that's great. And I'm not telling you can and can't do those things with each other. I'm just not comfortable with it.
Right.
Please don't do that with me. If you want to show me affection, leave a note on my desk. Send me an email. Bring me a donut. Whatever that might be.
Right.
But your physical attention I don't want.
You're defining your terms. That's all boundaries are, really. But boundaries can feel really harsh if you're not used to them.
Right.
So if you're used to every time that your mother calls you on the phone that you have to answer, you have to do whatever she asks, you have to be there and do all those things, that can be really, really hard. And you can feel really guilty to stop and say, you know what? I have my own things going on, and I'm not going to rearrange my schedule for you.
Yeah, and let's take it to another sports example. Let's say you're You go and you play basketball with your friends, and the expectation is that you're going to get pushed around, shoved around, knocked down onto the court, and because that's the way that we play. You don't have to subject yourself to that. If you feel that this is not okay, you don't have to say, well, I have to do it because if I don't, then the guys are going to call me names and they're going to make me feel bad and they're going to harass me about it for a while. So I guess I'm just going to be okay with being pushed around and shoved around. No, you don't have to subject yourself to that. There's nothing that says that you have to deal with anything that you're not comfortable with.
It's kind of built into the way you described that, because it's kind of built into maybe the court rules or just this group of players that this is how we play. And if you don't like it, you don't have to play with us.
So what would be some examples of how we could communicate clearly and succinctly to people around us what some of our boundaries are?
I found a really cool infographic, so I'll put that up on the screen, maybe right here, of some of these things. So I just want to read some of them here.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with boundaries, they can sound as simple as, I will end this phone call if you continue to shout at me. I can stay for half an hour. Thank you for your offer. Unfortunately, I can't make it. I'm not comfortable discussing that. Please do not discuss it with me. I need time to think about it. I'll come back to you. I don't respond to work emails on the weekend. I'm not comfortable with that. If you do it again, I will have to leave. I respect your opinion, but this is my life and my decision.
And now you're not going to be able to control how the other people will respond to that, but that's not on you anyway.
Right. And if you're dealing with people who are in a healthy headspace anyway, who are, we might say, psychologically and emotionally healthy, these are people who are going to hear those boundaries, like you're talking about the huggy environment at work. If you're dealing with people who are healthy psychologically, they're going to say, okay, got it, no problem, and move on. But if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know how boundaries work or has never experienced them before, or maybe they're a narcissist or a borderline personality disorder, there's all kinds of reasons why someone might just have a tantrum or explode in some way or emotionally act out. But I've always hugged you, but I'm just a hugger and you're going to get a hug anyway. I'll get you. No, this is my boundary. And this is the importance of sticking to it.
Right. So I was going to bring up one of the big things that we end up not doing, even when we've defined our boundaries and we've communicated our boundaries, is that we sometimes lapse on it because, well, now I'm going to be the jerk because now I made them feel bad. I guess it's okay if I capitulate this one time.
And that's the language that you used is so common. I just set boundaries and it really made them feel bad. No.
You have to be willing to defend your boundaries.
You have boundaries and they feel bad.
So in my case, the example that I would use is, I talked about this briefly before, my absentee father, biological father that is. I was trying to pursue a relationship with him, but he wanted a relationship on his terms. And his terms were being not available, pretty much. That was unacceptable to me.
Well, and you told me that he expected that when you came over that he was going to put you to work because that's what fathers do with their sons.
And that was as a child, as a teenager. It was, you're going to come over and you're going to do yard work and you're going to help me clean things, you're going to help me fix things. It's like, no. And I was very clear then. I was like, this is not what I'm looking for. If I have chores and I have responsibilities at the place where I live, I'm coming over to your house to visit with you for a day or two.
Right.
There should be no expectation from me that I'm going to be here doing stuff that you should be doing because this is your house, your responsibility.
And you're also not coming around asking for a handout, going like, hey, you're my dad, give me some money.
Yeah, and I never even asked him for anything, right? So into adulthood, it would still continue to be that way. Well, when are you going to come over and see me? When every once in a blue moon, I would call him, mostly at the nagging of my mother. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to talk to the guy, but if it makes you feel better, again, things that we do because we feel like we have to.
Last week we were talking about supporting our friends and family. And that's sometimes we do things that we don't really want to do. But this is where boundaries are that dividing line of these are the things that I will do. These are the things that I won't do. I'm not going to stand for treatment like that.
Call them out of the blue. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling? What's going on? Hey, when are you going to come see me? When are you going to do these things for me? When are you going to like, this is not how this is going to work. I'm inviting you to come to an event that I'm going to be having. You are more than welcome to come, and I would love to see you there. But it's not I'm going to drag myself or my family over to see you because you refuse to participate in my life. And the only way I'm going to be able to get you to be in my life is by forcing myself upon you. So I was like, that's a boundary that I'm not willing to break.
Right there, you're following two of the prime principles of boundaries. You be clear and specific, and you be firm and direct.
And you never apologize for it. You know how it makes you feel. You don't want to feel that way. So don't apologize. It's like, this is how I am. That's it.
And that leads right into the last one, which is do not negotiate. Your boundaries are not things that, well, if you do this for me, then I'll break my boundary for you because... So that leads perfectly into the last principle is do not negotiate. Boundaries aren't things that are wishy-washy.
Right.
Boundaries are, when this happens, I feel bad. And so I'm going to say that doesn't happen. I don't accept being treated that way. So I think the next topic to tackle here is how do you set boundaries? How do you know what behaviors are important to you to say that this is my line in the sand?
Right. So I think this goes a little bit back to what we mentioned in the beginning is using your feelings as indicators. If something does make you feel off in one way or another, we mentioned guilt, we mentioned fear, we mentioned uneasiness.
Shame.
Definitely. I think shame is a big one, especially when it comes to dealing with loved ones or family members. The guilt, shame that you can feel sometimes internally, sometimes from an external source, that you need to behave in a particular way or you need to accept behavior from other people because, well, that's just who they are. You know, Uncle Frank, that's who he is. And you're like, well, I realize that's who he is, but I'm not okay with it.
Hold on. Uncle Frank is our good example of networking.
I'm not saying your Uncle Frank, not your Uncle Frank.
So then how do we stick to our healthy boundaries? We've created them. We've let our feelings be our guide. We've noticed situations where we feel uncomfortable and we've gone through and we've said, these are specific behaviors that I just will not abide. We've even gone to the point of communicating them to the biggest offenders, we might say. How do you stick to it when the first thing that comes back to you is, oh, well, I can't believe you would treat me that way. How dare you?
What's always worked for me is the idea of free association. You get to choose who you get to associate with, and you're under exception of who you marry or you have a partner in. You're not obligated to maintain any of those types of relationships. If you've already expressed to somebody, hey, you know what, Casey, I really don't like it when you punch me in the arm when you're telling a joke. And you're like, come on, don't be a wuss. And I'm telling you, I don't like it. Oh, come on. All my friends let me do it. Not this one. And if you want me to continue to be your friend, you'll respect my boundary and not do it. And if you hit me in the arm one more time, thanks, it was nice knowing you.
That'll be the last time that you see me.
And it's not to try to make you feel bad. And we can have friendships that have boundaries set. But if you feel like, well, I can't abide by your request because I just feel that you're being petty or ridiculous, or whatever you tried to say to get to manipulate me into accepting your behavior, then I'm not going to associate myself with you anymore.
Now, in extreme cases, narcissism and codependence and things like that, you have every expectation that there's going to be some kind of emotional outburst, some kind of tantrum, or some kind of major big reaction. And it might be directed directly at you to let you know their displeasure with your decision to behave this way. Or it might be directed at reputation destruction by now talking to your friends, your siblings, your family, whoever, to say, can you believe that Casey behaved this way? Casey did this? Oh my good. You know, I was going to do all these nice things for you, but I can't because Casey decided that he wasn't going to.
Right.
And that's a very real possibility. And that makes this, on the one hand, all the harder to do, but on the other hand, all the more necessary.
But you know that you're not responsible for that person's behavior or the things that they say to other people. And that sometimes is hard for us to realize, right? Because if that comes back to us, like, oh, did you know what so-and-so told me that you did? God, I used to think that you were a good person, but now I'm kind of questioning it. Well, I can't help that you feel that way.
You can explain your side of the story.
And they can accept it or not. It's getting to know yourself and being okay with yourself to be able to say, well, if people feel like they're going to be able to manipulate me into doing something that I don't want to do, and I was very clear about it, then I don't need to associate with any of those people. Especially if they feel like it's okay to come over and tell me what a bad person I am because I didn't want to break my boundary. Now, on the other side of the coin, give people the opportunity to modify behaviors around you. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you force it down their throat or give them ultimatums per se. But if you say like, look, I'm fine talking to you at the office, but I've already expressed to you, don't try to hug me. I don't like it. You want to give me a handshake? I'm okay with handshakes. I'm okay with waves, stuff of that nature. If we accidentally bump into each other, that's going to happen, right? Tight hallways, we're in a small office, so on and so forth. But if you're intentionally doing something that I've already expressed I don't care for, that makes me feel that you're not taking what I say into consideration at all, and I would no longer would like to associate myself with you. But give them the opportunity to change their behavior around you.
Especially given that example in a work setting, there's usually some kind of HR policy or some kind of something or other that, look, I've made my boundaries clear. If you continue to disrespect my boundaries, I am going to report this to HR, and it'll be, the consequences will be whatever they decide to do with it.
I saw a video yesterday that made me laugh, and it was two older adult brothers having, we got to be even when we hit each other. And so one hit one guy first, and he hit him back, and then he hit him back, and then he hit him back, and he hit him back. And to me, this was something that was very familiar situation when I was growing up. This constant tit for tat until the point that they were actually slapping each other super hard because it kept this escalation going, right? And even though they're both saying, stop hitting me, and they both kept doing it, it's a weird situation with siblings. You probably didn't have this probably happen, I don't know. With 5 boys in the house and 1 girl, the boys were always constantly doing this to each other. This is the one little caveat, if you would, with when you're younger, with your brothers not respecting your boundaries. And it happens. And to me, I thought it was funny only for the fact that I reminisced on it. But now these guys were grown adults and they're still acting that way.
I think that does kind of lead into a little bit the idea of you can remove yourself from the situation without getting your own back. That's the way that you break the cycle, is you say, I'm not doing this.
Right.
Even if you're the one who, should get the next slap or however that works.
Right.
The way that you get out of that is you just decide that you're going to end the cycle. And sometimes if you're dealing with some of these personality disorders, to say that I'm not going to do this anymore,
right,
is breaking the cycle in a real big way.
Right.
So what does it look like to stick to those boundaries? It looks like asserting the boundary again, restating the boundary. It looks like hanging up the phone. It looks like walking away, leaving the place that you're at. It means stopping. It means enforcing that with your behavior, because that's what you control.
And that's it. That's all you can do. The other person like, yeah, I got the last hit on you. Ha ha ha. That's fine. That's not a game I was willing to play to begin with. And you move on. Another funny video I saw was people saying people should stop being petty. You should be more like animals and just not be petty. And the follow-up was these 2 fishes that dig their holes. They live in holes in the bottom of the ocean. And they're spitting dirt at the other one and constantly making the other one have to work to do more work. And they're doing it back and forth multiple times. And I was like, yeah, you got to learn how to break that cycle.
We should be like the animals.
So in summation, important to have boundaries, important to understand how to develop them. And then it's really important to make sure that not only that you communicate them, that you continue to support them and defend them even when they're challenged.
I'm going to blame it on the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to blame it on something.
You gotta do the dance.
He's never very good at that dance. A boundary can be that defining line between you and another person to tell where one of you ends and the other one begins in terms of emotional boundaries.
Yeah.
To say, I'm not responsible for your feelings.
Right.
I have my behaviors and you have your emotional responses to my behaviors, sure. But I don't own your emotional response. And we can request and we can cajole and we can do everything on our side of the net to control our side.
And you can allow for people to change and modify their behaviors, especially after you've said what your boundaries are and you have expectations that they will be met. Allow for that to happen. But if they don't...
And it may be a long process.
Right.
And we're not suggesting that you cut anybody out of your life specifically, but recognize that having healthy boundaries is going to keep you safe. Emotionally, sometimes physically, and that you do your best to help others come with you on the journey of discovery of healthy psychological behaviors. But ultimately, you've got to look out for yourself.
And I've said this multiple times on multiple occasions to multiple people. In the end, it's only you who's responsible for you. And it's always going to be you that has your best interests in heart. So listen to yourself And if something is getting to the point that making you feel uncomfortable, respect your own personal boundaries with people and defend them when necessary. Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs, and we'll see you next time.
WizNugs begins with a new episode every Thursday night on our YouTube channel. Those episodes will be available in podcast form the following Monday morning. So, whether you watch on YouTube or listen on the podcast, we hope you enjoy.